I actually feel quite sad this afternoon because I'm saying goodbye to this book, Woody Guthrie, Bound for Glory. It's been my companion in my writing bag or my coffee shop bag for several weeks now, and this afternoon I read the final chapter, which I had actually been putting off for several days because the enjoyment of this book has been so great for me. I've still got plenty in the bag because it is a phenomenal bag. I'm quite short-sighted, so when I'm writing I will use a pair of glasses. And I'll also use those glasses when I am reading. This is my current read. It's called Bound for Glory by Woody Guthrie. Woody Guthrie is basically a folk hero of the American Midwest, but also of the American acoustic music movement. This book, I'm just going to read it. On the back cover it says, Bound for Glory is the funny, cynical and earthy autobiography of Woody Guthrie, the father of American folk music. He tells of his childhood running wild in an Oklahoma oil boom town, the tragedies that struck his family, and of his life on the open road during the Great Depression. Hell-raising and brawling in boxcars, all the while singing to raise a dime for his next meal. But above all, this is a song for an America Woody saw from the lonesome highway as he travelled from one end of the country to the other with a guitar in hand and the songs that made him a legend drifting out over the Dust Bowl. It really is a superb book. Woody Guthrie, Bound for Glory. I was fortunate enough to buy this in Blackwell's in Oxford, and actually from an American bookseller who works there and is a fountain of knowledge on American cult literature. And I've been enjoying it and reading it. It's a fabulous book. One of the reasons it touched a nerve with me and why I had to buy it was in the early 1980s, I worked on a summer camp in the Catskill Mountains of New York. It was a place called Camp Olympus, and it was a place where on 2 occasions, each for a month, groups of teenage Americans from New York City would come up to the Catskill Mountains and have a month with us on their summer camp. I worked as a campcraft instructor with a friend who ran boating around the lake, and we would look after these kids at night in the camps, and we had an amazing time. But after the camp, I, with some friends, decided to hitchhike from New York, upstate New York, over to San Francisco, where my parents had some very good friends, and we all agreed to turn up at their house. There were actually 12 of us, and 11 of us made it to San Francisco. Hired cars, some went on public transport like the overland train, which has 2 decks and an observation car. I set off hitchhiking down the Appalachian Mountains with another counsellor from the same camp, and at the end of the Appalachians we decided to go our different ways, but I then continued across the states on my journey, and on several occasions I jumped into freight trains and rode freight trains across whole states at a time. On the way back from San Francisco to New York a month later, I actually jumped a freight train from Denver that took 3 days all the way to Chicago mainline station, where I climbed out from under a freight car, much to the astonishment of the besuited and well-heeled commuters in Chicago Central. But that's why I'm reading Woody Guthrie. It takes me straight back to my teenage years hitchhiking and riding freight trains across the United States. I can't possibly tell you some of the things that Woody Guthrie experienced in his childhood or the hardships he went through. But what I can do is share an extract from the book, just talking about some of the work he was doing as a teenager and the hardship he had to endure. This is from chapter 11, and it's called Boy in Search of Something. I was 13 when I went to live with a family of 13 people in a 2-room house. I was going on 15 when I got me a job shining shoes, cleaning spittoons, meeting the night trains in a hotel up in town. I was a little past 16 when I first hit the highway and took a trip down around the Gulf of Mexico, hoeing figs, watering strawberries, picking Mustang grapes, helping carpenters and well drillers, cleaning yards, chopping weeds, and moving garbage cans. Then I got tired of being a stranger, so I stuck my thumb in the air again and I landed back in the old hometown, Okama. I found me a job at $5 a week in a push-button service station. I got a letter twice a week as regular as a clock from Papa out on the Texas plains. I told him everything I thought and he told me everything he was hoping. Then one day he wrote that his burns had healed up enough for him to go to work, and he'd got him a job managing a whole block of property in Pampa, Texas. In 3 days I was standing in the little office, shaking his hand, talking old times, and all about my job with him as a general handyman around the property. I was just past my 17th birthday. Pampa was a Texas oil boom town and wilder than woodchuck. It travelled fast and it travelled light. Oil boom towns come that way and they go that way. Houses aren't built to last very long because the big majority of the working folks will walk into town, work like a horse for a while, put the oil wells in, drill the holes down 15,000 feet, bring in the black gushers, case off the hot flow, cap the high pressure, put valves on them, get the oil to flow steady and easy into the rich people's tanks, and then the field, a big thick forest of drilling rigs, just sits there pumping oil all over the world to run limousines, factories, war machines and fast trains. There's not much work left to do in the oil fields once the boys have developed it by hard work and hot sweat. And so they move along down the road as broke, as down and out, as tough and hard-hitting, as hard-working as the day they came to town. The town was mainly a scattering of little old shacks. They was built to last a few months, built out of old rotten boards, flattened oil barrels, buckets, sheet iron, crates of all kind, and penny sacks, gunny sacks. Some were lucky enough to have a floor, others just a dusty old dirt. The rent was high on those shacks. A common price was $5 a week for a 3-roomer. That meant one room cut 3 ways. With apologies in advance, this is chapter 13, Bound for Glory, and this chapter is called Off to California. It's a section about his hitchhiking time in a rough winter afternoon. I walked on down the highway, bucking into the wind. It got so hard I had to really duck my head and push. Yes, I know this old flat country up here on the Cap Rock Plains. Gumbo mud, hard crust sod, iron grass for tough cattle, and hard-hitting cowboys that work for the ranches. These old houses that sweep with the country and look like they're crying in the dust. I know who's in there, I know. I've stuck my head in a million, drove tractors, cleaned plows and harrows, greased discs and pulled the tumbleweeds out from under the machinery. That wind is getting harder. Whoa! That wind along the oily weeds sounded like a truck climbing a mountain in second gear. Every time and every step I took to the west, the wind pushed me back harder from the north. Like it was trying to tell me, for God's sake, boy, go to the south country, be smart, go where they sleep out every night. Don't split this blue blizzard west, because the country gets higher and flatter and windier and dustier, and you'll just get yourself colder and colder. But I thought somewhere west there's more room. Maybe the west country needs me out there. It needs me to help fill it up, and I need it to grow up in. I've got to keep bucking this wind, even if it gets colder. The storm poured in over the wheat country, and the powdery snow was like talcum or dried paste, blowing along with the grinding bits of dust. The snow was dry, the dust was cold, the sky was dark, and the wind was changing the whole world into an awful funny-looking, whistling and whining place. Flat fields and grazing lands got smoothery and close. It was about 3 more miles on to the little town of King's Mill. I walked around 2 of the miles in the blowing storm and got a ride with a truckload of worried cattle and a bundled-up driver, smoking loose tobacco that blew as wild as the dust and the snow and stung like acid when it lit in my eyes. We hollered the usual hollers back and forth at each other during the last mile that I rode with him. He said that he was turning north off the main road at King's Mill, and I said, "Let me out at the post office and I'll stand around in there by the stove and try to get another ride." In the general store, I bought a nickel's worth of postal cards and wrote all 5 of them back to the folks in Pampa saying, "Greetings from the land of sunshine and just plenty of good fresh air. Having wonderful tour. Yours truly, Woody." Pretty soon another cattleman offered me a ride on to the next cattle town. He smoked a pipe which had took up more of his time in the last 20 years than wife, kids, or his cow ranching. He told me, "This old panhandle country can be one mighty nice place when it's purty, but hell on earth when she gets riled up." His truck was governed down to 15 or 20 miles an hour. It was a windy, brittle hour before we crept the 15 miles from King's Mill over to White Deer. I was so cold when we got there that I couldn't hardly get out of the truck. The flying heat from the engine had kept me a degree or 2 above freezing, but stepping out into that wind head-on was worse. I walked another mile or 2 down the side of the road, and as long as I walked, kept fairly loose and limber. A time or 2 I stopped alongside the concrete and stood and waited with my head ducked into the wind, and it seemed like none of the drivers could see me. When I started to walk some more, I noticed that the muscles in the upper part of my legs were drawn up and hurt every time I took a step, and that it took me a few hundred yards walking to get full control over them. This scared me so much that I decided to keep walking or else. I love how Woody captures the whole struggle of hitchhiking. When it's bad weather, it's worse than ever. You're either soaked in the rain or you're frozen cold in the snow, and you can't move, your muscles ache, your body is in pain as you wait for the next lift. I actually feel quite sad this afternoon because I'm saying goodbye to this book, Woody Guthrie, Bound for Glory. It's been my companion in my writing bag or my coffee shop bag for several weeks now, and this afternoon I read the final chapter, which I had actually been putting off for several days because the enjoyment of this book has been so great for me. The significance of this book didn't really occur to me until I was doing a review for my What's in My Writing Bag video a few episodes ago. But the frequency with which Woody Guthrie travelled across the Midwest, backwards and forwards on freight trains in the 1930s, really struck a chord with me, and no pun intended, as he's a guitarist and a singer-songwriter, but it really did resonate with me in a very good way. And so reading the book is something that I have dipped into a chapter at a time, teasing out as much benefit and pleasure as I can from his writing and from the stories he's been telling within this book. Reading the book felt like a one-to-one conversation with the man himself, and it's been a superb adventure. I've already read a couple of short extracts from the book that really spoke to me because of my time hitchhiking in the States as a teenager. There is a postscript in the back of the book which I kind of knew, but to be honest it cemented the things I was aware of and reminded me of his importance to the music scene. Bound for Glory was published in 1943. Since that time, Woody and his songs have travelled from one end of America to the other. Woody Guthrie wrote more than 1,000 songs between 1936 and 1954 when he became hospitalised, a victim of Huntington's disease. The songs and ballads of Woody Guthrie have continued to grow in popularity. His songs have become as much a part of America as its rivers, its forests, its prairies, and the people whom Guthrie chronicled in them. Songs such as This Land Is Your Land, Reuben James, Tom Joad, Pastures of Plenty, Hard Travelling, So Long It's Been Good to Know You, Union Maid, Pretty Boy Floyd, Roll on Columbia, Dust Bowl Refugee, Blowing Down This Old Dusty Road, and of course the song from which this book is named, This Train is Bound for Glory. Woody's songs and his guitar made him a spokesman of the downtrodden everywhere, but he also sang of the beauty of America, a beauty he viewed from the open doors of boxcars as they sped across the country. He saw America from the open road, and he knew its people firsthand. There are other comments within the postscript, and I encourage you to read the book and enjoy it for yourself and savour every single chapter in each of the adventures that he takes you and I on as a reader. But it is a tremendous book, and as I said, I'm very sorry to be letting it go. Woody Guthrie, Bound for Glory. This copy that I've read is from Penguin Modern Classics, and I bought it from Blackwell's bookstore on Broad Street in Oxford. So a shout out to Lat, the American bookseller working there, who introduced me to this book when we talked about my travelling across the States in the 1980s as a teenager. Thank you very much, Lat.